Welcome everyone in for another episode of Security Sessions. We have a really distinguished guest with us today, Chuck Brooks, along with Stas, co-founder of Compyl. Today we are going to be focusing on a pretty hot topic right now that seems to be kind of a center of conversation, which is going to be around small and medium-sized business enterprises when it comes to critical aspects of operations, cyber risk. And we have some pretty experienced people to kind of share in this conversation. So Chuck, thanks for being here. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself before we dive into this chat.
Sure. No, thank you. It's great to be here. I have a sort of a diverse background that includes government and industry and media and academia. Currently, I teach at Georgetown University in the Cybersecurity Risk Management program, a graduate program with some great students. I also have my own consulting firm called Brooks Consulting International. Prior to that, I served at the Department of Homeland Security as one of the plank holders and Science and Technology Director. I also worked 10 years on Capitol Hill with the late Senator Inspector. In industry, I was a Vice President of Homeland Security for Xerox. And most recently, I retired out of, or semi-retired out of General Dynamics Mission Systems, where I was a growth strategist for cybersecurity products and new technologies. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time. And Stas, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. So I'm Stas Bojoukha. I'm the CEO and founder of Compyl. I'm an information security expert with 20 years in this space, predominantly in the financial services space. I have been a CISO several times in the past, and kind of live and breathe the security space.
Very good. Yeah, thanks for being here. Chuck, something I wanted to kind of dive right into, when it kind of pertains to the small to medium-sized enterprises, there's an evolving threat landscape today, and it's certainly a bit different than it was 5 years ago and even a decade ago. And I think all of us would agree it's going to be different in the next 6 months, maybe the next 12 months. What do you see as some of the challenges kind of right off the bat due to this evolving threat landscape that small to medium-sized enterprises can kind of look at, or what are they dealing with? What's front of mind for you?
Yeah, now, you're right. You depicted it perfectly when you said it's changing rapidly. In the past, it was sort of sporadic attacks against small, medium business, whatever was a target of opportunity. Now you have new technologies that have been introduced with adversaries who have a clear command of them already, and they're usually organized criminal groups supported sometimes by states, and they're out to make money. And they'll make money wherever it is. And small and medium businesses are great targets because they have no choice. For the most part, if they get breached, they're either going to go out of business or they're going to try and get their data back. And if they try and get their data back, it's usually paying ransomware. So they're a big target. The second thing really is that with these new technologies, they're automating a lot of these attacks. Now it used to be you hit a few companies here and there, but now they get thousands at once. They could also use artificial intelligence and machine learning really more correctly to find vulnerabilities too, who's doing this. And then they're hitting supply chains. And a lot of small and medium businesses are part of supply chains. And if they want to get to the big guys, it's a good way to get in. And they're doing that very successfully, particularly in defense aerospace and healthcare, community, education, and even in financial. So I think that the whole ecosystem for small businesses really, really become a dangerous one, very precarious. And the real problem, of course, is that they haven't recognized yet that they are a target.
Yeah, that's interesting. Stas, how do you kind of think about it?
I would agree with Chuck's interpretation of the situation. Security professionals are very highly in demand. There's not enough of them, and small and medium businesses tend to not be able to afford them. So you've got lots of people wearing different hats in organizations. And although I think technology has moved a long way, even in the past 5 years, and in terms of cloud technologies and making things a little bit easier and streamlining security across those, rather than having data centers and having a whole bunch of things everywhere, I think that's helped and made things a little bit easier for small and medium-sized businesses to operate, but it's also allowed a lot of companies to thrive and create new products very, very quickly that are insecure, that haven't been properly tested, that haven't gone through the ringer. So going back to Chuck's point about the supply chain management, there's a lot of companies that are using very small companies now to be innovative and to help them with a lot of things, but those companies don't have proper security in place, and they're not necessarily to blame, right? I mean, this securing products is very expensive. People in this space are very expensive, so there has to be new ways and new technologies to help them with that. But also it's an ever-changing landscape, right? I mean, Chuck, I'm assuming you're alluding to AI when you're talking about new technologies, because
Yes.
I mean, there's a whole marketplace and ecosystem now where I mean, I just saw one, I can't remember what it was called, but I saw one where they will literally scan the LinkedIn profile of the person and then customize a tailored email based on their posts and what their background is and where they are and everything. And there's no more of this being really easy to detect that it's a phishing email, because the grammar is now correct. The English is, it's written properly. It's the sophistication level has just gone through the roof. And I mean, ChatGPT came out in October, and we're 9 months into this, and it's just changing the entire landscape again. So that was a bit of a rant to say you have to stay on top of your game, but it's really hard to do so for small and medium-sized businesses.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really huge point, though. I think that the art of the fish has gotten so good, that often they'll take the CEO of the company or some executive, and they'll mimic the whole letterhead or the back logos of these companies. It's very difficult even for people that are professionals to recognize it, instinctively, if it's human resources or about your retirement account, or about something you need to do for security. Even they're very sophisticated in the way they get in, and it's very difficult nowadays to determine what is real and what isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I mean, business email compromise, it's one of those scenarios, right, where you keep people, you only give them a couple pieces of you only give them a couple tools, right? And it's basically, it's email. They don't need to be technical, but how creative they can get with that if you hold them to just that one particular niche. I'm sure people know about this, but Chuck, I'm sure you know about this, but I'm not sure other people know about this. But this business email compromise that happened a few years ago, but I think I think it's still a very prominent way of this happening. But they compromise one account, and then they buy a similar looking domain, and then they start a conversation with the compromised account plus this other domain that's also compromised. They start a chain between the two people, or talking, and then they'll rope in the CFO and be like, oh, I've been talking to account management and compliance, and they want us to make this payment, and it looks really, really legit. But just the innovation in doing something like that, and the time commitment to do that is just it's almost, I mean, it is impressive. It's impressive the lengths that people will go to with very basic, archaic tools.
Yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the struggles that these small to medium-sized businesses probably can't get around, or have to find ways to be more innovative is, budget constraints, limited resources, and, the idea of understanding when is the right time to bring on a dedicated IT professional, at what capacity, is I think a topic that I hear often, because maybe that 5-10 years ago threshold, it certainly is important to bring on an IT professional, but businesses, I don't think were even considering that. And now you're starting to see businesses having to make hires or find solutions earlier in their kind of maturity and their growth to just ensure and protect themselves. Stas, when it comes to a threshold, a signal, how do you think organizations or small to medium-sized businesses specifically can kind of think of that? What's a signal that says, man, we need to really bring a little more attention here, bring on a dedicated professional, bring on a consultant, start bringing in some software, somebody that has some experience. How do you think about that?
Generally, my experience has been, I think a lot of times these companies actually do have the capital to spend on security and compliance. The problem that I'm seeing is they They'll buy software, but they'll never configure it, right? They'll go out and they'll buy CrowdStrike, or they go out and they'll buy, XDR, they'll buy, the business packages of G Suite or Office 365 or E5 licenses, but they'll never properly implement them. So the things that keep happening are they're being compromised, even though they have all this great tooling in place. But it's just no one's there to configure it, no one's there to look after it, no one's there to evaluate it. That's a telltale sign. But an even easier one would be, hey guys, like, do you have a set of policies? Yes, we do. Can I see them? No, you can't. Do you have a network map? Yes, we do. Can I see it? No, you can't. It is all about the fundamentals and putting in the fundamentals. But the problem with the fundamentals is they're not shiny like CrowdStrike, right? Like they're difficult and they take time, and they have to be nurtured and maintained. And that's that's kind of the problem with it. And I've seen companies do it successfully, but they do it once with a consultant, but then they drop it afterwards because they just don't have the bandwidth to maintain it. And that's generally like when you get up to that level, and then you've been working that hard to get up to that certain maturity level, that's when you should probably consider bringing in an outsourced resource or an information, some sort of person that can help. Also, the other problem with this space is it's a very vast space, so you can't really just bring in like an officer or an analyst at that level. They're not going to be able to handle the entire landscape, so you have to augment it with some outsourcing as well. In my opinion, I know a lot of people say outsourcing doesn't work, and I tend to agree with them, but in this scenario, depending on the size, the complexity, the budgets, you have to be creative.
Interesting. Chuck, how do you kind of think about that? Are there signals that exist? I know we're being a bit vague here, not getting kind of nitty gritty in like a certain industry, but as an organization is kind of experiencing some growth, are there ways that they can kind of say like, yeah, I remember listening to what Chuck said, and this is happening. We really need to take security a little more serious.
Yeah, no, I think Stas hit it on the nose of it. There's just a dearth of talent, and sometimes these budgets are sparse, but everyone has the same issues. The orchestration problems are, they don't know what products to have, how to use them, and when someone stays, they leave. So they really have to look at alternatives, and there are alternatives out there. I mean, first of all, there's a cloud. I mean, you could have some sort of security managed in the cloud. If you're a small business, it's probably a good idea. I mean, you may want to separate your very sensitive data, but they have at least you make yourself less of a target, and you may have a provider, a legitimate cloud provider that can protect your assets, and a lot of the big guys do that. And the second thing is there's other managed service security groups out there that are now helping medium and small business. That's their model, and they're good. You have to do your own due diligence, but they're good to go to.
Yep.
And if you're looking for red flags, I think look in your own industry and see if you're if you're in health and you see that the hospitals are getting breached, or if clinics are getting breached, or if even the biotech's getting breached. It's a wake-up call that you need some sort of security. And the fact is that more likely than not, with a lot of these small businesses are going to go out of business if they do get breached. So they have to look at it not as a business cost, but as a business means of staying in operations.
Yeah.
And if they look at it that way up front, I think they're going to have a different perspective on security. And security too long is looked at, okay, we'll just check the box, it's compliance, it's not. And so I think that there's a different mindset. And the only way we could really do is education and outreach to a lot of these small businesses, and in every way you can, whether it's on social media or in organizations, because a lot of them are just, again, they're just unaware, or they don't understand, but it's not that difficult. Organized crime is now digital.
That's right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think like what I hear often in this space is organizations, when they're beginning to, Chuck, as you said, no longer rely on checking the box and actually start taking this stuff serious. They start to realize that hey, like, just because you have a SOC 2, that doesn't mean you're secure, and just because you send out a risk assessment doesn't mean that all your vendors are secure. Having somebody actually able to look at the information, digest what's going on, and actually evaluate what that information is. It's interesting. Stas, I know something you've talked about before is this idea of like not all SOC 2s are created equal. And frameworks are frameworks. They're just guidelines. Every organization within every industry has nuances that, a one size fits all approach can't possibly work. But or is there like any framework or any thoughts around guidelines that you like or places you think organizations could start?
Yeah, I mean, this just literally like last week released an entire an updated framework for small and medium-sized businesses, and this is definitely the most comprehensive in my opinion. Like the CSF framework is very good. It's very comprehensive, but again, you need to have people that know how to implement it, that know how to manage it and track it, and understand what it's actually saying, and put in the right recommendations. So you need someone that's technical, that understands this space, but it's definitely a good a good starting point. I think if you have nothing in place and you really are short on resources and in time, the CIS version 8 is pretty comprehensive as well, and it's a little bit lighter and easier to implement. But I think as a starting point, if you are going to do it and it requires maintenance, just put in a mechanism that you can maintain certain things and don't bite off more than you can chew. So example of that, put in policies that you can adhere to, policies that you can update at least annually, and then you can get the business to buy in, because there's nothing worse than getting a policy in place and then you not following the policy and then being called out.
Yeah. Chuck, how do you think about that? Are there any frameworks that you particularly like or that you look at and you think are
Well, I mean, the NIST is really applicable for the small and medium business. It's made for them. But I think, every little business is different, and it would behoove them, I think, to have their own risk management strategy put in place using those guidelines, or doing their own research and looking at some of the basics, what they could do. I mean, the reality is that their hackers usually go where the easiest targets are. And if you do some basic cybersecurity hygiene, you don't have to be a cyber expert, but that's a start. Make sure that you have secure firewalls, maybe encryption of your data, your networks are secure, your Wi-Fi, multi-factor authentication, strong passwords, and identity access and management.
Yeah.
That is something that I think any really basic business can manage.
Yeah,
they do that basics, and then they'll avoid at least being a top target. They may still, everyone could still get hit at one point, but you're much less likely to be a hit if you have those in place.
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, a little phishing and awareness training never hurts, right? I mean, the human element is always going to be a factor. And I think both Stas and Chuck, I think each of you have alluded to the level of sophistication that has kind of these phishing emails, business email compromise has kind of risen to. But I think we also have to understand, if we're not going to kind of train along the way and kind of bring some employees along, number one, you don't know what your risks are. You don't know what the level of kind of, cyber buy-in is. But then at some point, it's hard to kind of, point the finger or kind of in the aftermath to look at like what a little investment back into your people could have done or prohibited, after a breach. The last thing I wanted to kind of just touch on is just the incident response element, because I think far too often, maybe there's an incident that occurs and organizations begin to kind of get a little reactionary at that point, instead of kind of following the playbook. Chuck, kind of what, just if you don't mind, just like your experience when it comes to incident response, kind of ways that you kind of think about it, and if it could be applicable to kind of the small to medium sized business, maybe that would be a great place to start.
Sure, it's definitely applicable, and what you just talked about, training, is really the key element for that response. Your leadership, or even most of your employees, if you're a small or medium business, should be regularly trained in what to do if there's a breach, and you should have a risk management plan in place of who says what, who does what, where you go to. If it's being hacked by a foreign entity, maybe you can involve law enforcement, and they might be of assistance, particularly if it's cryptocurrency and other things what they're trying to trace. Making a big element to do that right now. Also, you need to see who's going to be the spokesperson for the company when something does happen.
Yeah.
And you should have a backup. I mean, if you're a small business, there's no reason not to have a separate database or computer that's not attached to a network that you could segment and use. And all those things are pretty easy to do. But I think, I think if every company expects to be breached and they have a plan in place to deal with to try to mitigate those issues, it's going to be a lot easier for them. It doesn't mean there's a guarantee they're going to get their data back or they're going to be in business, but it's more likely that they will at least avoid some of the hardships that other companies do have that don't have anything in place.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, Stas, I know something you and I have talked about, this whole concept of companies can no longer really think prevent breach. It has, it's kind of more of a assume breach mentality.
That's right.
Yeah, so just curious how you kind of think about that, how that could be applicable.
Yeah, I mean, there's a breach every day, right? I mean, you're so numb to hearing about who's been breached and where they've been breached. Honestly, it's going back to fundamentals, right? I mean, putting in a decent incident response plan, having playbooks in place, doing tabletop exercises, getting the business to buy in, having someone that's going to talk to the media when things happen, have a point person that talks to employees depending on what the breach is. I mean, this part really isn't rocket science. This is really just maintaining good policies and good procedures in an organization. But assuming breach is not great either. I mean, you want to do as much as you can to prevent it, but you need to be ready for it just in case it does happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. Well, I can't thank each of you enough for your time. This was a great conversation, Chuck. This was nice, not only meeting you, but kind of getting schooled a little bit. So thank you for being so generous with your time. Stas, the same. Really appreciate you kind of making time for this. I think it's very clear, a common topic in this industry is just trying to share education, be a source of knowledge. There is a talent gap here, but in reality, if it's going to be solved, it's going to be from the likes of these types of conversations and ones that are happening across every network, ISACA, across the board. So it's really great that we make time for this. And I want to thank both of you for it.
Perfect.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Be well. Have a wonderful day.